Hello, everybody. This is Samantha from the Law Offices of Samantha Wolfe, and I'm here today for our next virtual seminar. And we don't have a formal one where we are having clients jump on or referral sources jump on. I just wanted to take a few minutes this month and talk about a specific topic. We're going to try to do this over the summer, just shorter videos on a relevant topic we think our clients might enjoy. So today I'm going to talk about irrevocable burial CDs and the benefits, pros, cons of doing that. So let's first talk about what is an irrevocable burial CD. So this would be where you would go to your local bank. I know that Truist, F&M, M&T all have the capabilities to do an irrevocable burial CD. So the benefit of it is that you can set aside funds for your funeral home, your burial wishes, all of that. And the reason why you want to do this is because if you set aside the funds in a vehicle like an irrevocable burial CD, those funds are not available for long-term care costs. So if we have a client who's going into a nursing home, we always recommend that they set aside funds in an irrevocable burial CD because it allows them to spend down their assets in a way in which they be able to qualify for Medicaid, but it does allow the family to set aside funds so that not all the money is exhausted when the client passes away and they can pay for things like the burial. In order to comply with the Medicaid rules, it does have to be an irrevocable burial CD, which means that the client cannot assign, transfer, or get those funds back out of the CD. So I actually recently went with a client to a local bank and we set up an irrevocable burial CD. Now, another way that clients can do it that is very popular and that also works is to contact your funeral home, whatever your funeral home of choice is, and to see if you can set aside funds with a funeral home. Now, the reason that an irrevocable burial CD might be a benefit over that option is just that if that funeral home goes out of business, then at least an irrevocable burial CD isn't tied to a specific funeral. The other reason that might be helpful is sometimes funeral homes will be able to tell you a certain amount, but there's always usually a caveat to that, which is certain services that they would want to account for, like inflation or increases. So even if you try to prepay at a funeral home, sometimes there's still a component of that that would have to be paid at death. So you can do an irrevocable burial CD for that, and that would be another option. So what I wanted to do is every county in Pennsylvania has a limit. What this limit does is it says that if you put the funds in an irrevocable burial CD, as long as you don't go above this amount based on the county in which you want to be buried, then you can maximize this figure and put up to their maximum amount in the CD. So I wanted to show you the chart, which is found in the Pennsylvania Long-Term Care Handbook. This does change every year and it either increases or decreases. The interesting fact is for Franklin County, it actually decreased, and I'm going to show you that. But the thought being that you would put the maximum amount in the CD to pay for certain things. I had a client that actually was receiving care in another county. They were in Fulton County, but they were going to be buried in Franklin County, and putting in the maximum amount allowed for the expenses of transporting the body. So typically I recommend that families do maximize the irrevocable burial CD. Before I show you the amounts for each county, the other thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about is another way that clients handle it is sometimes they might do something with their life insurance policies. You can have a life insurance policy that has a cash value, and if the policy has a cash value, that cash value amount is available for your long-term care costs. So sometimes if you meet with a funeral director, they'll talk about assigning the policy to the funeral home, and the benefit there is then that immediately makes the life insurance policy not an available resource for nursing home costs, which is a big deal because cash value of the life insurance is available. But I did have a client that just tried to update the beneficiary designation to the funeral home, and that will not work. You do actually have to assign the life insurance policy to the funeral home. Now, if there are excess funds, typically the funeral home does pay it back to the estate of the decedent, which could be a problem if there is a Medicaid recovery lien. So Medicaid recovery lien happens when a client is in a nursing home at the time of their death. Medicaid pays paid towards their care. And then the Department of Human Services for the state of Pennsylvania is trying to recover the amount that Medicaid paid through the decedent's estate. And they can recover against any asset that passes through a client's will. So if you would have a situation where you'd have excess funds after assigning the funeral home, they get the life insurance, it's going to come back to the estate, which does make the funds subject to a Medicaid recovery lien. So that's something that you want to consider. But let me go ahead and share my screen here. I had this pulled up so that I can show you. Now, again, this is found in the Pennsylvania Long-Term Care Handbook. So if you type in your Google search and put in Pennsylvania Long-Term Care Handbook, you can find a link to this particular book. In there, under the certain subheadings, it does have the average cost of burial in each county. So what's important here is I'm looking, we have a lot of clients in Franklin County, so it's in this row right there where it talks about the maximum amount you can put in. So the column that's highlighted is the average cost in Franklin County for burial. So for example, we slide over, this was 2023, these first two columns. These second set of columns are 2024, and you're going to see over here it notes that it decreased from 2023 to 2024. So in Franklin County, right here, the highlighted is the average cost. The average cost in Franklin County is $14,462 in 2023. You can put a maximum amount of $18,077.50 into an irrevocable burial CD, and if you do put that maximum amount, a nursing home still cannot touch those funds because it's allocated into an irrevocable burial CD where the client can't assign or transfer. Now, again, it used to be $16,437. This amount does change every year. What the nursing home looks at is what year did you purchase the CD and what were the limits in that year. So, for example, if you had purchased a CD in 2023 and you had done it for the $20,546 and you had locked it in 2023 and signed the paperwork, the nursing home isn't going to have an issue because it's decreased because you maximized it in the year in which you purchased the CD. So the fact that it decreased isn't going to affect anybody that had already purchased the CD. So I wanted to make sure to note that. But if you're planning to, if you live in Franklin County and you're planning to be buried in a different county, again, it's always the county in which you're planning to be buried in. So again, I had a client in Fulton County. We actually used the Franklin County figures for that individual because they were planning to be buried in Franklin County. So again, the different columns are just showing, so this, the highlighted is the average cost. The white columns are just showing the maximum amount that you can put into those irrevocable burial CDs. If anybody needs this link, I will make sure that Amy gets it. So if a client or anybody who's watching this wants to know what the burial limits are in their county in Pennsylvania, we can certainly send a link and show that. I know sometimes it's a little difficult to find the link on the Department of Human Services website. So the bottom line is that you should be thinking about an irrevocable burial CD as a way to set aside funds for your family. That way you can ensure that there's going to be enough money to take care of your burial needs. Now, another tip would be not just to get the irrevocable burial CD, but to go ahead and talk to a funeral home, whichever one you feel most comfortable with, and go ahead and try to pick out or select as much as you can related to your funeral. It always helps the family so much when you've picked maybe the casket or the coffin if you're going to be buried, or if you've gone ahead and noted that you want to be cremated, and if you've gone ahead and calculated what you would want those fees to be, then what happens is when you pass away, the CD just pays to the funeral home. So I wanted to make sure everybody knew that. If anybody has any questions, we do offer initial consultations. You can call us at 717-655-2676. You can also email Amy at meek@skwlawoffice.com, and we'd be happy to schedule you an initial consultation. So thank you so much for jumping on our YouTube channel or on our social media accounts to watch this month's virtual seminar. We appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you.